All right, looks like we got some people. We already got some people joining us. It's exciting. How's your week been going?
Hectic. I did two One Tribe One Day events today too, so it's been a busy day. But
Yeah, I bet. I bet.
I'll ask. I'm going to ask you to put at some point. I'll mention Undergraduate Research Month.
I got the link ready.
Okay, just send that thing in. Yeah, because that'll be
Yep.
good for them to see.
All right. And for those of y'all who are joining us, I believe we have about 30 or so total that have registered. Just a little over that. But welcome to this admitted student session for undergraduate research for parents and family and students. If y'all are joining us as well, we'll give it a couple of minutes, maybe a minute or so, just to wait for everyone else to be joining us. You know how Zoom works with technical issues. Sometimes you never know in this virtual world. But to introduce myself, my name is Logan Reed. I am an assistant dean of admission. And when I'm not helping out with these admitted students events, I'm reading applications, traveling to high schools or college fairs. This year, of course, it was virtual, but doing various different admissions types events. And then if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, Daniel.
I'm Dan Crystal. I am a biology professor, and I've been at William & Mary for 25 years. This is my first and only job, and I am also, in the last couple of years, I've been doing a new position in addition to being a biology professor, and that is Director of Undergraduate Research. So that's a position that the university created really around the success of the Monroe Scholars Program, and which has propelled us, along with other things, into uh, being really at the forefront of undergraduate research in the whole country. So we now have a position dedicated to that, and so I speak both as a biology professor who has worked with hundreds of students on undergraduate research, including many, many Monroe scholars, and also now as the director of undergraduate research, in which I supervise the Monroe scholars along with a team. So welcome.
Yeah. And kind of how the session will work is that Dan will give kind of information from the first 15 to 20 minutes, and then we'll open it up to question and answer. To answer any of y'all's questions, please put your questions in the Q&A section. If you have anything general, like there's any technical issues, if you can't hear us for whatever reason and we need to fix something, you can put that in the chat. But if you have any questions, please put that in the Q&A part. But yeah, and it looks like we still have people filtering through. So hopefully, and I'll mention this at the end, but this is going to be recorded, so you will be able to get access to this for those of people, for those of y'all who will not be who join us later. But yeah, go ahead if you want to get started.
Sure. Thank you. So I'm going to cover a couple levels of perspective here. First of all, why William and Mary? Secondly, why the Monroe Scholars and what the Monroe Scholars Program is, and thirdly, hopefully lots of examples of undergraduate research that Monroe Scholars and other students at William and Mary can do and have engaged in. Your students, or you, if you are a student on this, have um, there we are, working from home, and someone rings the doorbell just like that. So you have a big decision to make, and anyone who's been admitted to the Monroe Scholars Program is also certainly admitted to many other good colleges and universities. So, how do you make that decision? You could do it badly the way I did when I went to college years ago, and that is you go to every campus, um, take a sniff in the dining hall to see if the food smells good, uh, don't talk to any professors, don't talk to any students, take a tour from someone who is reading a professional script. And then what I did was to go out to the soccer fields at every school and compare them because I wanted to play soccer. And that was really not a good process. I wasn't looking at what was important about the school, but I didn't know that at the time. And I went to the biggest research type university that you could go to, and I had an experience where I didn't interact much with professors and didn't prepare well for the career that I had. Luckily, I was able to catch up later. So now, coming from that perspective, I really appreciate what's valuable about William and Mary and why William and Mary is a great place to go to college, where I should have gone. I looked at lots of little schools and I looked at big schools, and didn't really understand the differences. But let me explain to you what the differences are, and why the dining hall and the soccer field and the tour are not really how you should determine which college to go to. At little schools, you get lots of attention from professors, which is great. And you'll have the same professors over and over because the departments are small. And so the whole English department might only have 6 people in it. And so you're going to have them 3 or 4 times each. You're going to get to know them extremely well. But those professors are so busy paying attention to you and teaching your courses that they don't do a lot of research at liberal arts colleges. They might do some in the summer. They might have research that's designed to sort of educate you about research, but you won't be doing high impact research. So why not go to a big, huge school where they do lots of high impact research, where they have medical schools and lots of biotechnology institutes and all sorts of facilities? Well, at those schools, research reigns. Research is what everyone is interested in, and research is why the faculty are there. And while they do teach classes, they don't really work with undergraduates outside of the classroom because they have graduate students, they have technicians, they have postdoctoral fellows, they have professional colleagues all over the world, and those faculty are incentivized only to do research, and they will teach classes. They are nice to your students, but they're not really fully engaged in the process. So while there's a ton of research going on at a place like that, your undergraduate won't get to do it. That's what happened to me. I fought and just didn't really have the stamina to convince somebody to work with me and spend their time training me so that I could help them with their research. Because they told me, by the time they're done that, they could have finished the project with a master's or PhD student. So William & Mary, we're right in between the little liberal arts college and the big research university, and we're one of the few schools in that position. So we have all of our faculty have a high research expectation, but they also spend 50% of their time invested in teaching well, and they consider training students and doing research with them to be part of both of those jobs, teaching and research. And you won't find that balance at many places. And our faculty, with their high research expectation, don't have graduate students to do that research with. We have very few graduate programs. We have 6,000 undergrads, which is a perfect mid-sized number, but we only have less than 2,000 graduate students. And they're in our little schools of education, law, business, marine science, and a few departments. Physics, computer science have PhD programs, American history, PhD program, and a couple others, small programs. But by and large, most of our departments just have undergraduates, and the faculty work with those undergraduates on research. So that is why you should come to William & Mary. What you learn inside the classroom at college is going to be more or less the same everywhere. The department names are going to be more or less the same everywhere. The faculty are going to be really smart PhDs at all those universities. But what happens outside the classroom is very different at William & Mary, because your student, especially as a Monroe Scholar, will have the opportunity, almost the obligation, certainly the expectation. 80% of our students do undergraduate research at some point in their career. And that's an opportunity that is simply not as easy at any other school. At William & Mary, we are, I think, the best in the country at providing high-quality undergraduate research experiences. That's hard to prove because the data are not available from the other schools, but I have never seen a school that does anything like what we do. And that's coming from my unbiased position as the director of undergraduate research. So that's why you should come to William & Mary, why your students should come to William & Mary. And I'd be happy to answer questions about that in a few moments. But let me tell you about the Monroe Scholars Program that your student or you have been admitted to. The program is based on the idea that we should free a student up for one summer at least to not have to get a summer job, to not have to find an internship, but to get paid a stipend to do a research project with a faculty member all summer. And they could do that at home with indirect supervision, remote supervision, or they could do that on campus with a place in the dorms to live or living in their apartment nearby. So we provide $3,000 for one summer stipend so that your student can work at least 7 weeks full-time on a project that they have come up with the mentorship of a professor. That project could be completely independent, or it could be part of a whole laboratory of people working on similar projects under a professor. Either way works just fine for a Monroe Scholar. In their freshman year, we offer $1,000 to scholars who want to do a pilot project for 3 weeks or more full time. And that we don't expect to turn into some finished, published manuscript, but we expect it to allow the student to explore whether they like research and maybe what they should do for their full summer project. In their second or third summer, they apply, and they're guaranteed funding if they give us an appropriate application. If it's not good enough, we send it back and they can revise it. There's a committee of 30 or 40 faculty members who review these things, and we do have a 100% funding rate, but sometimes they have to revise them. So that's the research component, and that's the heart of the Monroe Scholars Project program. Also, there are enrichment activities in which Monroe Scholars can sign up voluntarily to meet with professors in small groups to discuss their research or to meet with visiting scholars. Usually over lunch. During the pandemic, it's been remote, and so that is an enrichment program that goes throughout both semesters. Also, Monroe Scholars get to choose if they want to live in Monroe housing, which is one of 2 dormitories on campus. And that gives them the opportunity, if they want to sort of increase the probability that their hallmates and their roommate will be very high performing, best students in their class like they are. And so the Monroe Scholars are offered opportunities, not obligations. If they don't want to do research, they don't have to take their $3,000 or their $1,000. If they don't want to live in Monroe housing, they don't have to. They can live with their roommate from high school in any dormitory they want. But and if they don't want to come to our lunch enrichment programs, they don't have to do that either. But we offer these opportunities to try to get them on the path of hanging around with other future scholars, of doing a pilot project freshman year and another research project the second year. If you go to a professor and say, I'd like to work with you, the professor's first question after they decide if you're really interested is, how are we going to pay for this? Is the money going to come out of my grant to pay you for the summer, or are you going to apply for your own grant? And if they say, I've already got my own grant, I'm a Monroe Scholar, it increases the probability that the professor will work with them tremendously. The probability is already very high, but professors ethically don't like to have people working with them over the summer that aren't getting paid. And so they don't want to feel like they're exploiting their students. So having a Monroe Scholarship does help you get more quickly into a research lab at William & Mary. Although, of course, most students can get into a research group. And when I say lab, I'm not just talking about the white-coated STEM researchers at the campus. I'm talking about history professors. I'm talking about English professors. Every field that we have, Monroe Scholars can do projects in. And we often encourage them, if they come to me and ask, to do a project outside of their main area. So if they're a pre-med, let's say, and they're doing a biology major, and they're taking all science courses, but they're also interested in music, why not do a Monroe project to really fulfill your interest and really see if you dig deep into that area and study and become expert in a single question in that area, whether maybe it opens up some doors for you. So that's the why you should come to William & Mary and what the Monroe Scholars Program is in general. And I'm going to give you an example right now of sort of the group I know best, which are the students who've worked with me, and sort of what happened with our research. So it can take many forms. A student may come to you and say, I want to look at dinosaur DNA. And I might say, all right, I don't know a lot about that, but I can help you. I can point you in the right direction and, help you write this proposal, and you can work on that. Or they might say, well, birds are dinosaurs also. And so is there some research, Professor Crystal, that I can help you with? And I'll say, yeah, you know what? I'm going for the summer to do this field work on birds and how pollution affects them. If that interests you, you could develop a project around that. Here's some of the questions that we're looking at. And so the student may develop a project around that, come and work with me. I don't have to pay them out of my grant. They get a great experience. They may end up sticking in my lab, working with me for 3 more years, and going to graduate school to study pollution and how it affects birds. It may have changed their entire life, or they may decide that research wasn't really for them. We had a good time, but they actually want to be an English major and write poems about dinosaurs. And so then they can move on, and they've still had an incredibly valuable experience because it allowed them to figure out who they are. And I'm just as happy when that happens as when they dig in the field. So my research, I've worked with approximately 200 undergraduates in the last 25 years. I would say that 30 or 40 of them were probably Monroe Scholars, but I don't really keep track of that. And maybe 20, 25, 30. And what we did for many years was to go out to the Shenandoah Valley and to work on the mercury pollution in that river. And we would set up thousands of birdhouses and have birds nest in them, and take those birds and take a little sample of their blood and take a feather and put them back in their nest, and then come back to campus and analyze how much mercury was in those samples. And one student might be working on whether the mercury level was correlated with how the bird sang, because that was what they were interested in. And another student might be working on how the mercury level in the bird affected its hormones. And another student might be working on how the mercury level in the bird affected how many of its eggs hatched. So they're all different projects, and the students may be doing a project that I really wanted done anyway, or they may have brought something into my group that I didn't think would happen that I'm very excited about. And that's really tremendous when that happens. Our students' work was more than just a training and research. It resulted in many, many papers. I believe I've published 50 papers with student authors on them. And these are real scientific papers in real journals, and the people reading them don't know that the person was a junior Monroe Scholar or a sophomore Monroe Scholar. They just know that this is science published in a journal. One of those articles was published in the best journal in the world, and half of the authors are undergraduates. The other half were master's students and me. And so this research is really impactful. This research actually resulted in the government extracting $50 million from the polluter who put that mercury in the river to make the situation better for the birds there. So every single student who worked on that, every single Monroe Scholar had a part in that, and it wouldn't have happened without them. And many of them now work in this area because they were so excited to be part of something so real. And that's why research outside the classroom is, in my opinion, extremely important part of undergraduate education, because it's real. And you aren't just going through the motions like you do in intro chemistry lab, where you pour things together and you see if you got a white precipitate, and if you didn't, you say, oh, we must have messed up and put the wrong amount in. Now when you're doing independent research like Monroe Scholars do, no matter what the field, you know that it matters, and so you do it at a very high level, and it changes your life. And the difference between knowing that it matters and knowing that it doesn't matter is huge, even if you're doing exactly the same thing. So I feel like this program and the way that we emphasize undergraduate research at William & Mary is just the best thing we can do for students. Because again, what you do inside the classroom is pretty good everywhere. College is pretty good everywhere. People really love college for a good reason, because it's fun and you learn a lot. But not everybody gets a chance to do undergraduate research, especially if they're not at William & Mary. I'll tell you one more example, just for a different kind of research that's not so STEM oriented, that's exciting. And this is something Monroe Scholars can do as well. If they don't come up with their own completely independent project, they can join groups such as, there's a history professor, and he takes a few students during the school year, and they work on gathering a very specific kind of data. And if they're a Monroe Scholar, they can then spend the whole summer intensively working on this same project. And the data that they gather is ship manifests. So in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, ship trade was extremely important. And newspapers were frequently advertised when a boat showed up in a harbor somewhere, what was on the boat and who was traveling on it, who owned the ship, or when a boat leaves, same thing, or when a ship sank. what was on it, who was on it. And so these students go through and scour these old newspapers in whatever language they're written in and find information about every boat that traveled the Atlantic in those centuries. And they assemble this information in a big standardized database, which will eventually become a public resource that any researcher can use. But right now, they're the only ones who can use it. After they've been doing this entry-level scouring and finding of data, then they're experts on this database, and they can answer their own questions for their summer research, funded by a Monroe Scholarship perhaps, about whatever they want. Who was being moved around in these ships? What was being moved around in these ships? These ships were running the economy and telling the whole history of that era. And so that's another example of a kind of innovative project outside of the STEM fields, where a student can work as part of a research group, but doing their own independent work. Now, it's not a one-step process. You have to work your way up this escalator of research skills until you're able to do independent research. But that's something that a Monroe Scholar would be more likely to get involved in because they have their own summer finances. And outside of the STEM fields, those kinds of grants are harder to find. So what I'd like to do now is just open it up for any comments or questions that we have right now, and then I'll just keep on talking.
Yeah, feel free to put that in the Q&A section. I'll put a link in the chat. This is Research Month for William & Mary, so feel free to use that link to see all the different various other examples that we've had for students who have completed research at William & Mary. But yeah, please feel free to throw any questions you have in the Q&A section.
And I will talk more about undergraduate research month at William & Mary in a few moments, but I'm glad that link is up there for you. Are there any questions? It's fine. I can keep talking. It's just going to give you a break. Okay. So we've covered why William & Mary. We've covered what the Monroe project or the Monroe program is and what it offers, which is mainly living in that special residence the freshman year and later summer money, and fourthly the enrichment program. There's also some social events, an ice cream truck is brought in, have some outdoor events. But what we haven't talked about is why a student would really benefit from doing undergraduate research. It's something that a lot of parents aren't that familiar with. And so I'll get to that in a second, but I see we have a couple questions. So I'll answer those first, and then I'll talk about what the benefits are of undergraduate research for your student. I'm saying they should come to William & Mary as a Monroe Scholar so that they can do undergraduate research, but I also need to explain to you why that's a good thing, no matter what their interests are. All right.
Looks like we have a question. So Lila asked, other than the stipend, are there other merit scholarships associated with a Monroe Scholar? So, I mean, as far as I know, we have the 1693 scholars, which I guess you could say is associated. It's kind of the other one of the other merit scholarships that we have that also has a research stipend. So I guess it's kind of similar in that aspect. It's only about 8 students receive the 1693 scholars program. So it's like 1% of students, and then the Monroe Scholars is about 10% of the population. So
I can add, there's actually 4 scholars groups at William & Mary, all of which are very different flavors. So there's the 1693s, which is only 8. Then there's the Monroes, which there are more of. And then there are the Sharp Scholars, which is Sharp with an E at the end. Not to be, we also have the Sharp without an E at the end program. But the Sharp Scholars do community-based participatory research. So they basically partner with community organizations, mostly do social science research in things like studying the eviction crisis, studying poverty and how it affects schools. And they work with local partners to do a mix of research and service projects, which go along with 2 classes they take as a freshman. Any student, including a Monroe Scholar, can apply for that program, and a Monroe Scholar is almost certainly going to be accepted in that program. They get the application after they matriculate at William & Mary. They get the invitation. So after you matriculate at William & Mary, you can join the SHARP program, which is also administered by my institute, the Charles Center. So we have the only stipulation is that if you're in the Sharp program and the Monroe program, you have to live in the Sharp. Sharp has a special dormitory, and you do have to live in that one because it's a living learning community. So there's 1693, there's Monroe, there's Sharp, which a Monroe scholar can join, and then finally there's W.M. Shore scholars. The W.M. Shore scholars have all faced some kind of adversity, and that may be due to race, it may be due to poverty, it may be due to something in their family history, it may be due to the schools that they went to. W.M. Shore scholars are would already know that they've been offered that position, but W.M. Shore scholars have also a big emphasis on research. They also have access to summer research funds, as do Sharp scholars and Monroe scholars and 1693 scholars. So the scholars programs, some of them dovetail, so a student could be in up to 3 of those programs, but they would know right now, except for the Sharp program, which they apply to after they matriculate, and then they're offered the invitation. So that's the long answer to your question of what are these others. The 4 scholars programs are administered together by the Charles Center. I'm at some level supervising all of them, and I offer research position opportunities to an all scholars listserv, which they all get. So every so often I send information out to them. I also talk to them, like today I sent them something about Undergraduate Research Month. Come out and see your friends doing, presenting their research. We have a website, which is in the chat there, which takes you to a landing page that has hundreds of research projects, either short videos about them or abstracts, graphical or written. And you can go through those. New ones are dropped every week. Also at the bottom, there's over 30 events that are happening in the month of April for Undergraduate Research Month at William & Mary. And you can attend those events if you'd like. Those events are all presentations by undergraduate researchers. And they range from student plays to dance to virtual art galleries where students work on science and art projects together, to more traditional honors theses in modern languages, biology, just about anything you think of. There's an event celebrating that and giving opportunities to students who did research in that area. And I strongly recommend, if you're thinking about any other school, go look at Undergraduate Research Month and see if that seems like a kind of thing that you would want your student to be involved in. Why should your student do undergraduate research? I'll get back to that in a minute, but I think we might have a second question.
Yeah. So another question is, how does academic advisory work with Monroe scholars?
Okay. The Monroe scholars will be assigned an academic advisor like any other student, which will be in the field which they indicated they might be interested in. And that will be a regular professor who will have approximately 10 advisees, and they will advise them for the whole first 2 years until they declare a major. When they declare a major, they will get a new advisor in their major area. So the initial advisor is a professor like me who just talks to them about what they want out of college and which classes to sign up for. And they have to meet with them. They get a special PIN number that they can only get from their advisor. So we make them meet with them during the freshman year. After that, we just strongly suggest that they meet with him. So they get advised just like any other student. However, we have a program called the Peer Student Advisors that is made up of trained Monroe scholars who peer advise any student, but a lot of it is directed at other Monroe scholars. And these students are experts in fellowships and scholarship opportunities. And so these students will help others be aware of opportunities such as the Fulbright, the Rhodes, the Marshall, the Truman, the Goldwater, the Udall, all of these dozens of scholarships and fellowships which William & Mary can nominate people for. We need students to be aware of them and to be thinking about them for several years in advance sometimes so they prepare themselves properly, then to get the interview prep they need, and to get help putting their big package together. And then William & Mary will send these juniors and seniors out into the world with these applications and hope for the best. So that's a different form of advising. That comes from the Charles Center. I'm also at some level supervising that, but we have a specialist in that, and she trains the peer student advisors, who then the students are more comfortable coming and talking to other students about it at early stages, and then the finalists will percolate up to us. So regular advising for Monroe Scholars, no different than anybody else, but then we also offer a lot of close, sort of higher level advising on things like how to get a fellowship.
And another question that we have is, how would research work as a Monroe Scholar and as a part of the joint degree program? When would the research be completed?
Yes, that's a good question. The joint degree program, for those who don't know, means you're getting a joint degree from St. Andrews University in Scotland and from William and Mary, and you spend 2 years there and 2 years here. The projects are often a Monroe project is done overseas anyway, so a person could do their project while in Scotland. They could do their project here. It just depends when they want to do it. Their freshman year, you can do a 3-week project. That's probably gonna be done here, and then the full summer project could be done at either location. And already being in Scotland, of course, makes the project much less expensive if you wanted to do a project in Europe. So advising, especially after the pandemic, remote advising is not a problem at all. So you could be advised here by your St. Andrews professor, or you could be advised there by your William and Mary professor. Not a problem. There's no limitation whatsoever for a student in the joint degree program to use their Monroe scholarship. Only their creativity, about how you do this with so many additional opportunities would be the only limiting factor. But there's absolutely nothing keeping a joint degree student from fully taking advantage of this program, except they have to be here freshman year if they want to live in the special housing, which I think they almost always are anyway.
Yeah. Great. And I think those are all the questions that have been asked. Someone just threw it in the chat though.
I see that. Does research continue all year round? If so, how is it funded? So that's a great question. And it's a kind of a hybrid answer. So if you start a research project using your Monroe scholarship in the summer, then, well, let me step back for a second. The way research generally starts at William & Mary is that a student is talking to a professor inside class, after class, in the classroom, or just in the hallway somewhere. Or it's their advisor or someone that they've sought out just for this conversation. And they say, I'd like to do research with you. And that usually is during the semester. And so usually research starts at a slow level during the semester, mainly just helping other students, learning the skills, or doing a lot of reading and meeting with a professor and talking about the reading. So that's usually during the semester, and that's not funded. You get credit for that, okay? Now, if your research is costly, because you have to buy equipment, then your professor is going to pay for that because your professor will be doing research in that area. If it's not at all in the professor's area, the student may have to pay for that themselves. Now, if the student comes to the professor and says, guess what, I have funding already for the summer through my Monroe project. Would you like to, could I work in your group and continue this research? The professor will always be overjoyed for that and say, yes, absolutely. You can pay yourself your stipend. I'll supply everything else you need. Now the research really gets going in the summer full time. And of course, research is never done. It always just spawns more questions. And so the semester comes around and the student says, I want to keep doing this research. The professor will say, great, you're a full-time student. You can't get a stipend. So there's no payment there, but you can keep doing the research. I will fund the supplies or the travel or whatever that you need. And it can continue on. The next summer, the student could get paid off of the professor's grant, or the student could decide they want to do something other than that research. They want to study abroad. They want to do a research experience at a different university. There's all sorts of options, but typically these relationships last 2 years or more, and they take different forms, and the funding comes from different places. The Monroe Scholars also can apply for a second project after their first one, if there's enough money in the program, which there always has been to date, but who knows what's going to happen in the future. So if the second summer the Monroe Scholar applies, they can get a second Monroe project. That's not guaranteed like the first one was, though. So that's a good question. Now, I keep threatening to get back to this question of why your student should do research. So let me address that now. What does a student get out of research? Well, obviously, if a student wants to be a researcher, doing research and training, and that is extremely important. But most students don't want to be researchers. So why should the future doctor, the future lawyer, the future accountant, why should any of these people do research? Well, First of all, the research in and of itself is a fantastic learning experience. So just for personal reasons, it broadens your education tremendously. So that's one reason. But we're all interested, as parents, we're interested in more practical things as well. So will this research help them get a job? And the answer is yes, in several ways. First of all, there is no better way to get a job than to have an extremely good letter of recommendation from a person who knows you extremely well and is a professor. That is the best thing you can get coming out of college. And that's what research gets for you. If nothing else, you get to know a professor really well, and they get to know how you think, and they can write a very personal letter of recommendation that will get you a job or get you into law school or get you into medical school or wherever it is you want to go. Secondly, or thirdly now, the interview that you have for a job, for medical school, for law school, those interviews, if you've mentioned that you've done research, I cannot tell you how often the student comes back to me and says, the only thing the person wanted to ask me about was my research. They wanted to hear me talking about my research. So that puts a student in such a favorable position during an interview, no matter what the interview is for. That's the thing. These are often students that have done research in one area, and they're interviewing for something completely different. Or, of course, they could be interviewing for a Fulbright or Truman or something like that. So that kind of being able to be passionate about something, being able to be expert about something, having published a paper on something or been part of that process, these are all really great things to talk about at an interview, and they put you in a very good professional light. So a student will learn a lot from undergraduate research. They will develop a relationship with one or more professors who can recommend them in ways that classroom professors never can. And they will have something really good to talk about at interviews and also for the rest of their life. So they can impress the boss later at the Christmas party by talking about their dinosaur DNA research. So I just feel like the skills that you learn at research are very valuable, no matter whether you want to be a researcher or whether it's always been your goal to study one thing and then go off and do another thing. You're going to really benefit from having done undergraduate research. So
that's a great. Oh, sorry, not the. So we have another question that's kind of a good segue. They say, "What is William Mary's history with the Fulbright and other outside scholarships?" And they ask for a website link. So I don't know if that's maybe for the research month, or maybe a link to those.
We don't actually to find out. It's hard. We don't have a link where we just list all the winners of all the scholarships. But some of that information is available in different places. But I will tell you what our history is. And I'm supervising all of that effort too. So I'm quite familiar with it. So we do extremely well for Fulbrights, which is the specific one answered in the question. But we put students up for dozens of different awards. We also do extremely well for Goldwaters. The Goldwater is a STEM award that you get as a junior, so it pays for, as a sophomore or a junior, it pays for tuition for half of your tuition for 2 years. So each fellowship allows different schools to nominate a set number of people. So we're allowed to nominate 4 Goldwaters. This year we won 3 out of 4, which is fantastic. Some years we win fewer. One year recently we won all 4. Other awards are unlimited, such as the Fulbright. So we had 27 Fulbright semifinalists this year. Now, a semifinalist is essentially a finalist. That means you've gotten through the whole process and you've been recommended to the country where you want to work. So Fulbright's for going overseas, and it's funded by the government in the hopes that these people will come back and work for our government. So 27 finalists. We don't know how many we're going to get this year out of those 27, but 27 William Mary students are being considered by governments in other countries right now, with just a few possibilities to pick between. Hopefully, most of them will get those Fulbrights. Rhodes Scholars, we have not. I'll be honest, we have not done as well as we should have. We have only had 10 in the entire history of the school. Rhodes Scholars generally go to Ivy League schools, but that's changing a little bit. Last year we had a finalist. This year we had 2 finalists. I started I took over the program last year, and we started really trying to prepare our students and to increase the number of people applying. So hopefully we'll get a Rhodes Scholarship maybe next year. But that's a very rare event. There's only 36 in the whole country every year. We do very well with many of the awards, and we could do better with some others. And it all depends on, the flavor of your students. So our students tend to be very service oriented. So we do well with social science types of fellowships that are looking for people who want to go into government. We do pretty well with STEM ones because our STEM undergraduate research is fantastic, and that's what they're looking for. We have not done as well with Rhodes or Marshall, which are two very prestigious ones. They're very particular. You have to want to go to Oxford and get a master's degree for Rhodes. You have to want to go to another UK university other than Oxford or Cambridge for the Marshall. For the Mitchell, you have to want to study in Ireland. So there's some limits to how many people we can get to apply for these things. But that was a really long answer to the question of how well do we do. We do pretty well. We could do better. And with your student, we will do better.
All right, so next question. Can the initial project be designed to build upon itself from year to year? 3 weeks sounds like a short period of time.
That's a great question. And that's exactly how we've designed the program. So we feel like nobody should do research their first semester because we need to make sure they can do well in classes while still living away from their parents and eating unfamiliar food and hanging out with their friends all night. So we make sure people don't start too early. But by the end of their freshman year, some people have found research positions, and many of them have talked to a professor but don't really have a project in mind. So we don't want them to commit to a whole summer. So we give them this opportunity of $1,000 for 3 weeks. That's a pilot project. You could do it all summer if you want, but we're not encouraging to do that. The second year, we want them to hopefully follow up on the same conversation with the professor that led to this pilot project. If it worked out well, then study all through your sophomore year and then do your full Monroe project the summer after your sophomore year. That's often where it ends because the student spends the summer after their junior year abroad or at an internship with a company that they want to work for. And then after senior year, they've graduated. So sometimes the project starts with 3 weeks, goes to a full summer, then goes to a full year, and then goes to an honors thesis, so a second full year, and then goes to graduate school and a career. Other times, 3 weeks plus a summer is enough for them to say, I don't like research. I like other things, but I did try it, and I know that, and I found out something about myself. So the iterative process where it builds on itself is the way it is designed, but it's extremely flexible to meet the needs of your students. And we do have a lot of students who get paid internships or positions every summer and never actually use their money. And that's fine too. We just give the money to another student.
Yeah, good answer. And then so someone's asked, not specifically related to research, but wanted to know if freshmen are allowed to have cars on campus.
Yeah, I know the answer to that too.
Go for it.
They cannot have cars on campus unless they get permission because they have a job that's usually educationally related. So maybe shadowing, if they're a pre-med, maybe in their second year they can have a car on campus so they can go do their shadowing for medical school and work in a clinic or something like that. But you have to get permission the first 2 years, and it's not guaranteed, and you have to have a good reason. And I agree with that. Our campus is much better off with fewer cars. It's really a walk-in campus, so it's hard.
It was designed before cars, so.
It was designed before cars, yes, long before cars. And so it's small enough that you don't need a car to get around campus. If you have a real reason that you need to go somewhere off campus on a regular basis, then you should be able to get permission to have a car, but you may have to find your own parking for it somewhere else.
All right, and we got another question that popped up. Does William & Mary honor AP credits in any form, and how does it work? So I can answer that pretty straightforward. We have a form online that very clearly states if you get this score for this AP exam, then you will get these credits. And I can probably look that up pretty easily while we have time.
And I can tell you from the professor's perspective, students often want to use their AP scores to get out of taking a class that they've already had before. And we encourage them to come and talk to the professor for those intro classes and to say, well, what was your course like? And do you really feel like you want to jump right into this upper level classes in this field, or are you putting yourself at a disadvantage? So we do have a serious conversation with them. If you're interested in, say, going to medical school or law school, it's a dangerous thing to do, to skip out of a class that may not have been the best and to go right into the second level class and end up with a C in that class. So we do ask that they think about it carefully before they do that, but certainly they can. We honor those credits. Each department does it slightly differently.
Yes, and then someone also asked if it's the same for IB, and that same form that I sent in the chat also lists the credits that you can get for IB exams as well as A level exams as well. So, and then another question, what are the benefits, additional benefits of these Sharp Scholars? Is there an overlap with opportunities for Monroe Scholars? Why should a Monroe Scholar apply for Sharp?
Great question. Monroe is generic with respect to what discipline you're in. So you can study whatever you want with your Monroe Scholarship. It's also additive with a Sharp Scholarship, so they don't cancel each other out in any way. If you are interested in doing community-based participatory research, so usually studying civic issues, you can join the Sharp program. You get 2 freshman courses that you wouldn't get as a Monroe Scholar, and you have the opportunity to join this built-in network of community organizations that collaborate with the program. And so if that's where your interests lie, then adding the Sharp program to the Monroe Scholars program, it's completely different. It's totally additive. There's no overlap at all. The Sharp program increases your chances of getting additional summer money beyond your Monroe program, but you will use your Monroe money first. And also there's the dormitory situation. So Monroe housing is for Monroe Scholars, but they don't have to live there. But Sharp Scholars, I believe, have to live in Spotswood dorm because it's a living learning community and they do lots of activities together, and it is the heart of that program, that dormitory. So your freshman year, you would be living in a different dormitory as a Sharp Scholar who's also a Monroe Scholar. As a Monroe Scholar who's not a Sharp Scholar, you can live in any dorm you want, but most choose to live in this very nice, well, it's nice because of the community of people that live there. It's not physically nicer than the other dorms, but it's really great because of the community spirit of the place. So I would encourage a student to look into and apply for the Sharp program if they're interested in, say, a career in nonprofit, with a nonprofit organization, a career in law, a career as a community organizer, a career as an educator. Those are some of the areas that Sharp would strengthen them. And you have to do it as a freshman. So you only have one shot.
Yeah, and so we have another question. Can you speak about diversity in the research programs?
Great question. That's on the minds of everyone at this university and every university probably, is how can we make these opportunities available to everyone and not have them snatched up by the people who are sort of the most prepared from the best schools and perhaps not representing the full diversity of William & Mary. So the W.M. Shore program is 100% dedicated to the very thing that you mentioned, which is getting students from a diversity of backgrounds into these high impact opportunities, particularly undergraduate research. So we have a whole program for that. Now, Monroe Scholars would not automatically be in the W.M. Shore program unless they were from underrepresented groups, in which case they might have been offered a spot in that. But the W.M. Shore program is open to everyone in terms of their programming. So anyone can go to their programs, which are designed to try to provide more information and more access to people who are part of our community who don't always get these opportunities. So every single professor that I know is looking for opportunities to offer to underrepresented students. It's just, everyone is concerned about this and everyone is trying to create equal opportunity and a level playing field. As a director of undergraduate research, I've made that a pretty important part of my agenda in several ways. First of all, creating the all scholars group so that the different groups, including W.M. Shore, sort of are all part of one entity and get the same opportunities sent to them from me. Secondly, the allocation of research funds used to be done by a very small group of people. So the Charles Center gives out $1 million a year to undergraduates. Many of those are the Monroe Scholars getting their Monroe money. The decisions on who to give the money to from the portions of that are the competitive portions was made by a smaller group of people. When I came in, I created a faculty committee of 35 people from every single department and representing all sorts of disciplinary areas, so that the applications from the students were reviewed by a very broad range of people, and so that there would be a more level playing field. And then I created, unfortunately it was disbanded for the pandemic, but I will recreate it, something called Research Matchmaker. So Research Matchmaker is a way for faculty to put out opportunities and for students to apply for those opportunities through this matchmaker. And what that does is to mean there's a less of the kind of backroom dealings where a professor says, hey, you're a good student, would you like to work in my lab? And more transparent opportunities open to everybody because it's actually advertised. We can't stop people from just making an offer to someone in the hallway at the water cooler, a student that they liked, and saying, would you like to work in my lab? That's always going to happen. But what we're trying to do is create as much as possible, make these opportunities available to everyone. So those are just a couple of things that I've done in this position. But I can just assure you that I can't say we're doing better than other schools, but we are very, very concerned about it. This idea that the most prepared, privileged students come in and take all the privileges, they're the most able to grab these opportunities, and we want to make sure everyone has an equal opportunity for that.
Yeah, definitely. And so another question, how much investment of time is SHARP program plus Monroe? How do you keep students from being overwhelmed?
Great question. We are concerned about students being overwhelmed. The biggest factor, by the way, about that's causing students to be overwhelmed, and people aren't talking about this enough, but it's double majoring. So everybody comes in now, and their parents have told them, or somebody has put it in their head that they should double major because they don't only want to do one major. That doesn't look good. That's a bad idea. Most people should probably just do one major, unless there's a really specific reason to do a double major. So that's where a lot of the stress comes from. But doing undergraduate research can be very time consuming. The Monroe program does offer lots of opportunities, but not obligations. You do not have to do your research project ever. You don't have to do a freshman one. You can just do the older one. You can do neither. You don't have to go to the weekly or the regular enrichment programs. You don't have to do any part of this. It's opportunities. So the Monroe program does not cause people to be overwhelmed at all. In fact, by guaranteeing you a summer stipend 1 year, it removes some stress about what you're going to do that summer. The SHARP program you take 2 classes. Now, those are replacing other classes. So you take those 2 classes instead of 2 other freshman classes. They replace your Call 100 and your Call 150, which you would take anyway. So they're not adding workload there, but what they are doing is adding a outside of classroom component to that, which can be fairly time consuming if you get into it. But it's also over at the end of freshman year, which is just when the Monroe project ideas are probably getting started. So the 2 are not going to overwhelm you at all. I would say that's the least of your worries. You could drop one or 2 clubs and you'll be right back in the same position. So I wouldn't worry about that at all. And of course, the student can not do whatever they want. They can drop out of those programs.
Great answer. I love it. So looks like all the questions so far have been answered, which is great. We got about 6 minutes left, so we'll give it maybe a minute to see if there's any other questions that people are typing right now or thinking about. And Dan, I just want to thank you so much for giving this valuable information, these parents and family and students and whatnot. And parents and family and students, thank you so much for attending this. We really appreciate it. We hope to see you all in the fall. Hopefully, I know the plan right now is to be in person on campus. Of course, that's always tentative based off of what happens, but we're hoping to see you all on our campus in the fall. So, thank you all so much. I appreciate it.
Congratulations on your child being admitted to William & Mary as a Monroe Scholar. It means you did something very right when you were raising them, and we really look forward to working with them this fall, and hope they come here. And if you do have questions, you can direct them to Logan. He'll direct them to me, and I'd be happy to follow up with anyone afterwards.
Yeah,
Thanks again for
definitely.
coming.
Yeah, thank you all so much for coming. I'm going to do the awkward hand waving. So thank you all so much for coming. I hope everyone has a good rest of their week. And if they have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us. See y'all.